Jamie R. Mills, Alabama, 16 years on death row. In 2004, Floyd and Vera Hill, a 55-year married couple, were robbed and brutally murdered. Jamie Ray Mills was convicted and sentenced to death for their murders, even though he denied any involvement in their deaths. On June 24, 2004, in the late afternoon, 30-year-old Jamie Mills and his spouse Joanne Mills went to Floyd and Vera Hill's residence on County Road 54 in Gwinn, Marion County, Alabama, with the intention of robbing them. Mrs. Hill, 72 years old, suffered from diabetes and was in terrible health. Mr. Floyd Hill, who was 87 years old, took care of his sick wife by giving her prescribed medications, which he stored on the kitchen table in a secured tackle box. He set his alarm for every 4 hours to make sure her prescription pills were given on time and correctly. The Hills lived alone, but their adult grandkids who lived nearby often came to see how their grandparents were doing. Even though they were both retired, the Hills often conducted yard sales, probably more to keep themselves busy and active than to supplement their Social Security income. The workers at the nearby Amoca fuel station, where Mills was last employed before the killings, knew Mr. Hill to usually pay for his gas with cash and to constantly carry substantial amounts of cash in his pocket. Mills denied knowing the Hills, but the jury came to the conclusion that he, who was unemployed at the time, was undoubtedly aware of the Hills and had planned a scheme to steal their money. On June 24, 2004, shortly after dusk, Angela Jones visited her grandparents, Floyd and Vera Hill, after multiple phone calls to inquire about their well-being had been unsuccessful. The Hills seemed to be at home, but when they knocked on the door, nobody answered. The door was locked. For a welfare check, Angela called the police department. It took Officer Larry Webb about 3 or 4 minutes to get to the house. When Webb got there, Angela Jones told him that the Hills had spoken to her family just after 2 p.m., and that was when everything was okay. The Hills did not answer when Officer Webb and Mrs. Jones knocked on the doors and windows. Webb picked up his cell and dialed the Hills residence. Although there was no audible ring coming from the Hills house, it was discovered that his cell phone was ringing. Then, from the front porch, Officer Webb pointed his flashlight inside the house, and Angela saw that Vera Hill's walker was in the living room and her bed was made and vacant. There was no movement in the house, despite Mr. Hill's alarm going off for Mrs. Hill's prescription. Mrs. Jones started to worry that there was a serious problem. Webb then went to the prefabricated building on the Hills property, which was encased with polyethylene-type plastic and X-type lattice to store items from their yard sale. Webb dragged the little bench up to the door and climbed up to see over it because it was padlocked. At the back of the building, Officer Webb saw Floyd Hill lying on his back in a pool of blood with a bloody towel put over his face. Mr. Hill had his cane positioned across his lower limbs. Then, just inside the door, Webb noticed Vera Hill lying on her right side. Her face and head were covered with blood, and she sat in a puddle of it. Vera Hill made a left arm motion. Webb contacted 911 at 8:42 p.m. to request the dispatch for an ambulance and then asked for backup. After breaking through the plastic wall and tearing off the lattice, Webb entered the building and examined Vera Hill. She was still breathing. Floyd Hill was cold to the touch and had no pulse. Webb saw that Mrs. Hill had numerous long bleeding gashes on her head, and she said, "Let me out of here," several times when people asked her what had happened. After receiving medical attention, she was taken to the hospital via ambulance. Floyd Hill was declared deceased on the spot. The Gwinn Police Department, the Marion County District Attorney's Office, and the Alabama Department of Forensic Science jointly secured the area and launched an investigation. Vera Hill's clothing and fingernail clippings were obtained, the crime scene was analyzed, pictures were taken, and blood samples were gathered. As the victim's house and possessions were being processed, it was found that the Hills' phone line was disconnected, a police scanner was missing, as well as Floyd Hill's wallet, Vera Hill's purse, and a green padlocked tackle box containing Vera Hill's medication. Following Floyd Hill's autopsy, blunt and sharp force injuries to the head and neck were found to be the cause of death. 2.5 months after being moved from the Winfield Hospital to UAB Hospital in Birmingham, Alabama, where she received treatment for brain injuries, a depressed skull fracture on the back of her head, fractures around her left eye, fractures to the nasal cavity, a broken neck, and crushed hands, Vera Hill passed away on September 12, 2004, at the home of her daughter, Brenda Barger, while receiving hospice care. Vera Hill's autopsy revealed that complications from blunt head trauma were the cause of death in her case. During an interview with Jennifer Yaden, the Hills' next-door neighbor, at around 11:15 p.m. on June 24, 2004, Marion County District Attorney investigators Tommy Moore and Ken Mays learned that Yaden had observed a white, late-model, four-door sedan passing by her home multiple times that day. She saw that identical car parked in the Hills' driveway as well. On June 25, 2004, at around 12:05 a.m., investigators Moore and Mays went back to the crime site and spoke with Officer Larry Webb and Chief Brian McCraw of the Gwinn Police about the information they had received from Yaden. Webb and McCraw both told the detectives about a man in the area called Jamie Mills who drove a white vehicle similar to the one Yaden had described. A patrol unit was dispatched to Jamie and his wife Joanne's home at this point, but it didn't seem like anyone was there. Chief McCraw was asked by investigator Moore to regularly send a car to the Millses' home to check whether they were home to be questioned. Officers Baylock and Webb discovered Jamie and Joanne trying to flee the Millses' home in a little white 1990 two-door Nissan Infiniti M30 at 9:45 a.m. on June 25. The Millses attempted to leave but were blocked by the officers pulling across the drive. Then, in order for them to speak, Officer Baylock requested Jamie Mills to back the car up in the drive. On June 24, 2004, Mills was taken to the Gwinn City Hall to be questioned over his whereabouts. At this point, he denied knowing anything about the Hills and claimed that on June 24, he and Joanne were in Brilliant house hunting before spending the night at his father's house. When Marion County District Attorney Jack Bostic and investigator Ted Smith came at the Millses' home, they questioned Joanne about her whereabouts at the day of the Hills assault. She consented to the search of the Millses' residence, their white two-door sedan, and the car's trunk while she was being questioned by investigator Ted Smith. A green tackle box that fit the description of the tackle box Vera Hill used to store her medication was visible in the car trunk. It also had a cut padlock. A big blue duffel bag that seemed like it had been smeared with blood was also clearly visible. Joanne was read her Miranda rights at this point, but she chose to waive them in order to make a statement. After that, a search warrant was issued and Officer Webb and Police Chief Brian McCraw were summoned to the residence. Officers from the Gwinn Police Department, the Marion County Drug Task Force, and the Alabama Bureau of Investigation carried out the search. Jamie Mills was brought back to his home during this period, where he was later arrested for capital murder and taken to the Marion County Jail. The search of the items contained in the vehicle's trunk revealed that the green tackle box contained numerous pill bottles with prescriptions belonging to Vera Hill. The duffel bag contained an assortment of items, including one large concrete block, one pair of size 12 tennis shoes with bloodstains on them, one bloodstained pair of work pants with Jamie Mills's name on the inside tab, one black t-shirt with bloodstains, one pair of tennis shoes with bloodstains, one telephone with cut cord attached, one man's wallet containing the driver license of James Floyd Hill, one lady's purse with papers identifying it as Vera Hill, one machete with blood and hair on it, one ball-peen hammer with blood on it wrapped in paper, and one lug nut tire tool. The items from inside the trunk were itemized and photographed before the car, toolbox, duffel bag, and contents were handed over to forensic science for examination. DNA analysis was later performed on the machete, hammer, tire tool, black t-shirt, and black pants. Test results revealed that the primary source of blood found on the machete matched that of Floyd Hill, and the secondary source matched that of Vera Hill. The blood found on the ball-peen hammer matched that of Vera Hill. The blood found on the tire tool was a mixture, with Vera Hill being the major contributor and Floyd Hill being the minor contributor. The blood on the black t-shirt matched that of Vera Hill. The blood on the pants, containing the tab with Jamie Mills's name, matched that of Floyd Hill. Joanne Mills testified on August 22, 2007, during Jamie Mills's trial, that on June 23, 2004, she and her husband had spent the entire night using methamphetamine at their home. They remained at their house until about 5 o'clock on Thursday, June 24, 2004, at which point they went to the Webster's Market grocery store to buy cigarettes. Once the cigarettes were bought, she and Jamie departed Webster's and made a stop in the parking lot of Fred's Cheap Shop to speak with Brandy West, Joanne's cousin. Jamie told Joanne that he was going to talk to a man regarding money and that she should just follow him once they left Fred's parking lot. When the Millses arrived at the Hills house at approximately 5:15 p.m., the Hills welcomed the Millses inside, where Jamie tried using the Hills' phone to make many calls while Joanne sat and spoke with the Hills. Joanne claimed that Mr. Hill addressed Jamie by name and was clearly familiar with him. Vera Hill wanted to show Joanne Mills some of their yard sale items that were kept in their shed after Jamie had finished using the phone and the two spouses had chatted for a while. Because it was raining, Floyd Hill opened the door of the padlocked structure and let Vera Hill, Jamie Mills, and Joanne wait outside. Floyd Hill then came back and handed the umbrella to the women so they could continue towards the building. Floyd left the building and walked back inside to retrieve a light fixture. Following the Hills' display of their sale things to the Millses, Jamie Mills carried on the conversation with Floyd Hill in the shed, and the two women made their way back to the porch. Joanne Mills testified that she heard a loud noise and saw what looked to be Jamie Mills's silhouette through the plastic siding of the building. He appeared to be swinging something with both hands over his shoulder. Then, Joanne went back to the shed with Vera to find out what had happened. When they entered the shed, they saw Floyd Hill on the ground and watched Jamie Mills use a hammer to strike Vera Hill in the back of the head. He hit Mrs. Hill with the hammer once more when she tried to stand up. Joanne went on to say that she heard Jamie hitting Floyd and Vera repeatedly while standing in the building's corner with her eyes closed. She heard Jamie walking back and forth between the two victims, his feet scraping the earth. Following the ending of Jamie's striking sounds, he handed Joanne Mills a machete, a tire tool, and a hammer. Jamie also showed her how to cover Floyd Hill's head with a white towel to stop the gurgling sounds. Then Jamie came out of the shed with Joanne Mills. After they locked the door, the two returned to the Hills' residence. Before leaving the house and going back to their own on County Road 83, the couple searched the house and removed the padlocked tackle box, Vera's pocketbook, the phone, and the police scanner. When Jamie got to the Mills' house, he carried everything from the Hills' house into the kitchen. Joanne showered. After that, Jamie and Joanne looked over the things they had taken from the Hills' house: wallet, handbag, prescription in the green tackle box, and everything else. They put them in a bag with the machete, tire tool, and hammer. About $140 in cash was retrieved by the Millses from the Hills. After taking a shower, Jamie called Benji Ho, a local drug addict. Benji visited the Millses at their house and bought some painkillers. He then left the Millses' home, and Jamie and Joanne put the bag that contained the belongings from the Hills' home in the shed before spending the night and playing dominoes at Jamie's father's house in Hamilton, Alabama. When Jamie and Joanne Mills arrived home the following morning, June 25, 2004, they discovered that dogs had ripped open the bag holding the bloodied objects from the Hills' home. Joanne pulled out a big duffel bag, and the Millses packed the following items inside: a huge cement block, a hammer, a tire tool, a phone, a wallet, a handbag, and the clothes they had on when the attacks occurred. Then the couple put the green tackle box and the duffel bag in the trunk of their car. Officers Baylock and Stanley Webb stopped the two as they were leaving the house to dispose of the tackle box and duffel bag. The state of Alabama executed Jamie Ray Mills, 50 years old, by lethal injection. At 6:07 p.m., the observation room's front window had its drapes open. Mills had an IV line in each arm and was strapped to a gurney cruciform. The lines passed through a tiny, square-shaped opening in the death chamber's back. His last words were, "I love my family. I love my brother and sister. I couldn't ask for anything more. I love y'all. Carry on." Through the enormous glass window, Mills seemed to be able to see his witnesses. He repeatedly gave them the thumbs up. His spiritual guide came over to the stretcher and seemed to join him in prayer. Mills gave his spiritual advisor a wink before turning back to face his family and giving them the thumbs up. While receiving a blessing from the spiritual counselor, he closed his eyes and seemed to pass out. The advisor went to the foot of the stretcher, reached down, and touched his left leg. Mills's name was called out and his awareness was checked by a guard at the head of the gurney, who raked a thumb across Mills's left eyelid. The guard then gave Mills's upper left arm and inside skin a pinch. It seemed that Mills was still breathing. His chest was twitching slightly and his abdomen fluttered as though he was breathing very shallowly. During Mills's execution, a number of witnesses started crying. He seemed to draw his last breath at 6:16 p.m. Officials at the prison said that he passed away at around 6:26 p.m. On Execution Row, Mills met with 6 visitors and relished a seafood feast during his last hours. His last meal included 3 large shrimp, 2 catfish fillet, 3 oysters, 3 onion rings, and 1 stuffed crab. In connection with the crime, Joanne Mills is currently serving a life sentence without the possibility of parole. Please hit that subscribe button if you like my channel. See you next time. Bye bye.